When was the last time you truly felt alive? I'm not talking about the moment you made a lot of money or reached another milestone. I mean truly alive, light, joyful for no reason, deeply connected to yourself. Do you remember that feeling? Or has it become a rare guest, lost somewhere between loans, deadlines, and endless shoulds? Today, we're going to explore something most people are afraid to even think about. What happens to the soul when money becomes the center of our lives? Why is it that the more we achieve, the less meaning we seem to feel? Why, in a world where almost everything can be bought, is genuine joy so hard to find? This is not an anti-money video. Money is just a tool. But in the hands of someone who's lost their inner compass, even a tool can become a weapon of destruction. We live in an age of anxiety. Burnout is the new normal. Losing your inner direction has become a painful reality. And all of this unfolds against the backdrop of a never-ending race for external success. But the soul is not a machine. It doesn't run on KPIs. It can't be fulfilled by the latest phone or social status. And if we don't pause and look within, we may lose the most precious thing we have, ourselves. In this video, we'll explore when and why the material began to outweigh the spiritual, how it shows up in our lives, and whether it's still possible to find that delicate balance, where the soul feels alive and the material knows its place. If something inside you has long been yearning to break free, stay with us. This video is for you. To understand why money and external success have taken the throne in our inner world, we need to go back, much further than we might think. There was a time when human life revolved around the tribe, nature, and a connection to something greater. There were no banks, no credit cards, no designer brands. There were rituals, traditions, and meanings passed down through generations. A rich person wasn't someone who had much, but someone who knew how to give. And wisdom wasn't measured by income, but by one's ability to live in harmony with self and with the world. But everything changed. As trade expanded, cities grew, and industrialization took over, values began to shift. A new measure of worth emerged: money. Gradually, human life was no longer measured by the quality of feeling, but by the quantity of possessions. In the 20th century, this shift accelerated. After wars, destruction, and depression came a hunger for comfort. People were tired of pain. They wanted safety, stability, and with that came the golden age of consumerism. Advertising didn't just sell products, it sold dreams. It whispered, "You'll be happy if you have this." At first it was household gadgets, then cars, then entire lifestyles. You are what you wear. You are where you work. You are how much you earn. And before long, schools stopped teaching us how to listen to our soul. Instead, they taught us how to fit into a system where your worth is tied to constant achievement. If you can't prove your value, you're nobody. Social media became the new mirror, but this mirror often lies. We began comparing ourselves not to real people, but to carefully curated images, perfect bodies, perfect homes, perfect vacations. And if you don't have those things, you feel guilt, shame, anxiety, even when your life is actually just fine. In such a system, it's easy to forget that you're a living being, not a brand, that you are a soul, not a productivity tool, that you came into this world not just to earn, but to experience life. The cult of productivity has become a cult of pressure. We've grown afraid of pauses, afraid of rest, afraid to simply be ourselves without needing to justify it. And so, money, not as a tool, but as an idea, took center stage in our lives. And somewhere deep inside that silence, the soul began to quietly scream. Sometimes it starts with a subtle fatigue. You think, maybe I just didn't sleep well. Then comes the irritation, for no clear reason. You feel sleepy even during the day. The world loses its color. The things you used to love, no longer spark joy, but you keep going, doing what you're supposed to do, waking up to the alarm, sending emails, attending meetings, checking your bank account, your to-do list, your calendar. But inside, there's an emptiness, as if someone turned off the light. This isn't laziness, it's not weakness. It's your soul, tired of being silent. When the material starts to overshadow the inner world, the body begins to send signals. But we rarely listen. Here are the most common signs that the soul is starting to lose its voice. Chronic fatigue without a clear cause. You sleep, but never feel rested. You eat, but don't feel nourished. You socialize, but still feel alone. A sense of emptiness despite outer success. You got the promotion, bought the new thing, completed the big project. Everyone congratulates you. But inside, there's a dull whisper. So what? Loss of inspiration. You forget what it's like to do something purely for joy. Every action must be productive, useful, profitable, but the soul plays by different rules. It longs for the pointless and the beautiful. To sing, to paint, to walk, simply because it feels good. Anxiety without a clear reason. You might be sitting in total safety, with money in the bank, and still feel like something's wrong. It's not the world pressing in. It's your soul, trapped in a corner, quietly crying, I can't live like this anymore. And this is more common than we think. People who look successful on the outside cry themselves to sleep at night. Mothers with beautiful families feel guilty for feeling nothing. Men with thriving careers secretly dream of running away to start over. Even among the smiling faces of celebrities, we hear it more and more. I achieved everything and lost myself in the process. When we lose connection with the soul, life doesn't feel heavy because it's hard. It feels heavy because it's no longer ours. And if you feel like you're living someone else's life, this isn't weakness. This is awakening. It's the first step toward reclaiming your right to be real. At this point, there's often an inner protest. But you can't survive without money. Aren't spirituality and material success opposites? Can you really be both successful and authentic? Yes, you can. But it requires a shift in perspective. The problem isn't money itself. The problem is, who does the money serve? Money, by its nature, is neutral energy. It amplifies what already exists within a person. In the hands of the greedy, it becomes a tool of control. In the hands of the generous, a way to give. In the hands of the lost, a source of anxiety. And in the hands of the conscious, a resource for soulful creation. Imagine an artist who sells her paintings, a doctor who opens a clinic based on true healing, a woman who starts a small business that brings joy to her and her customers. They earn money, but for them, money is a result, not the goal. These people don't live for profit, they live for meaning. And profit becomes energy that flows in response to sincerity, effort, and love for the work they do. Today, more and more people are awakening to this truth. They're tired of robotic living, tired of empty numbers, tired of the sense that everything around them is fake. So they begin to build new ways of working, creating, doing business, where the human soul, not the system, is at the center. Yes, you can earn. Yes, you can live in comfort. But if you don't betray your soul, you remain alive. The key lies in your priorities. You are not here for money. Money is here for you. It holds no power over you, unless you give it the power to define who you are. Balance is possible, but it starts with a simple question. Why am I doing this? For what? For whom? Does this bring me to life or drain me? When you begin to answer these questions honestly, you'll start to hear your soul speaking to you again. When money stops being just a tool and becomes the meaning of life, we slowly fall into traps, subtle, sticky, and often invisible. They disguise themselves as responsibility, ambition, or even common sense. but they all share one purpose: to suffocate what's most alive within us, the soul. The first trap is the pursuit of status. We start living to impress, to be accepted, to look like we made it. We obsess over appearances, the car, the neighborhood, the labels on our clothes, and even when it's not what we truly want, we conform just to belong. We wear masks, the successful one, the productive one, the in-demand one. But inside, there's silence. And the louder the applause outside, the deeper the pain within. Because we're not living our own life. We're chasing an image, not truth. The second trap is working for money, not for meaning. You wake up not because you want to, but because you have to. Each day feels the same. Your energy goes not into creativity or growth, but into survival. Many people stay in jobs for years. Jobs that don't light them up, inspire them, or nourish them. But they stay, for the paycheck, for the safety, out of fear of change. Meanwhile, the soul stays silent, or worse, it starts to scream, if you're still able to hear it. And burnout comes, not because you worked too hard, but because you betrayed what you love. The third trap is constant comparison, especially through social media. You scroll through your feed, and it seems like everyone's life is better. Someone has a prettier home, a dreamier vacation, the perfect family, and suddenly you feel behind, not enough, like something's wrong with you. And once again, the soul suffers. Because it was never meant to compete. It is unique, like a fingerprint. And every time you compare it to someone else's highlight reel, you kill a little bit of its magic. The fourth trap is giving up your dream in exchange for stability. You once knew what you wanted, as a child, as a young adult, in those quiet evenings when you still believed anything was possible. But then you chose the safe path. You gave up your dream because now's not the time. I have to earn. That's not practical. And you began to build a life that isn't yours. From the outside, it looks fine. But inside, the light has gone out. Letting go of a dream is always a betrayal, and the soul remembers. And finally, the fifth trap, the fear of poverty as a form of inner slavery. This isn't about actually being poor. It's about the constant sense of threat. You may have savings, a solid job, and still live in fear that it'll all collapse. You clutch, you rush, you grasp for more, and forget how to enjoy what you already have. The soul in that state contracts. It can no longer breathe, because the soul is nourished by trust, not fear. All of these traps have one thing in common. They make us strangers to ourselves. They create the illusion of life, but never let us feel it. And the longer we stay inside them, the harder it becomes to return to what's real. But return is always possible. When the soul has been silent for a long time, it doesn't disappear. It waits. Patiently, like sunlight behind clouds, like spring beneath the snow. And one day, it begins to make itself known. Gently, but persistently. You start to feel a strange sensation more and more often, as if something is off. Everything seems fine on the surface. Your job is stable, your home is there. The people around you are content, but inside, there's a quiet ache, a dull longing. Sometimes it comes suddenly, right in the middle of an ordinary day. You're sitting at your desk or stuck in traffic, and a thought crosses your mind. Why am I doing all this? Where am I in my own life? That is the first call, the soul's whisper. Not always dramatic, often barely audible. It may show up as a desire to simplify, to let go of excess, to leave, to be alone for a while, to feel something real again, a craving for silence, for nature, for people with whom you don't have to wear a mask. Flashes of memory, of who you were before life got so complicated. This is the beginning of a reevaluation. You realize that all the things you've collected don't bring peace, and the simplest things, a conversation with someone you love, a walk at sunset, a song from childhood, suddenly fill your heart. This is awakening. Sometimes it's frightening. Your old life begins to crumble. Your goals lose meaning. People don't recognize you anymore. But it's necessary, because the soul cannot live in a cage. Even if the cage is made of gold, the path back to yourself is not always sudden. More often, it's slow, like dawn. You begin to relearn how to be you, how to feel, how to listen, how to slow down. You stop rushing because you finally understand. What matters isn't in the future, it's right here, in the present. You begin to trust again, life, yourself, that inner voice. And this return is the most valuable thing that can happen to you. Because from that moment on, you no longer live by the script, you live by the soul. When the soul has been drowned out by the noise of the outer world for too long, it doesn't just need attention, it needs a gentle return. You don't have to quit your job tomorrow, move to the mountains, or give up all material things. Coming back to yourself doesn't begin with radical changes. It begins with something smaller, with honesty, with a simple inner question: what is really happening to me? One of the most important questions you can ask yourself is, what would I do if money didn't matter? The answer can be disarming. It might scare you. It might stir grief or regret. But almost always, it holds a piece of truth. It points you toward your real desires, toward where your soul is still alive, still waiting for you. Another question that's just as powerful: where do I feel truly alive? Not safe, not comfortable, not correct, but alive. That unmistakable feeling that you're here, you're breathing, you're real. For some, it's art. For others, it's nature. For some, it's silence. For others, laughter with a child. Everyone has their own answer. But the soul always responds when you get closer to it. And from there, the path isn't dramatic. It's built from simple steps. Silence, every day, even a little. No screens, no news, no outside noise. Just being, just listening. Not to others, to yourself. Sometimes in that silence, you begin to feel what was long buried: desire, pain, longing, inspiration. All of it is the language of the soul. Creativity is another road home, not for profit, not for praise, but simply because you can. Paint, sing, keep a journal, write stories, knead clay, cook a meal. Do something not for the result, but for the process. When we create, even in the smallest ways, we let the soul breathe, and of course, connection. We all need at least one moment of real, honest, unmasked human contact, where we don't have to be strong, or productive, or impressive, just ourselves. If no one around you offers that, start with you. Write yourself a letter, ask yourself questions, begin telling the truth, even if only on paper. That alone is the beginning of healing. And finally, service. When we do something for others, not from guilt, not from duty, but from the heart, we become full. It can be something small, listening, supporting, simply being present. Sometimes the soul comes alive, not when we receive, but when we give. Not because we have to, but because we can. These steps don't require wealth. They don't require success. They don't require permission. They require one thing: the courage to be honest with yourself. And each one brings you back to what's real, to the space of silence, presence, simplicity, and love. There comes a moment when you begin to understand. Money is not the enemy. You don't have to fear it. You don't have to worship it. You simply have to put it in its right place. The real problem begins when money becomes the master of your life. When it decides who you should be, what you should feel, who you spend time with, how you measure your worth. When every decision becomes a question of profit and not a question of meaning, that's when the soul begins to retreat. And what's left is silence, coldness, routine without heart. But there is another way. You can choose a path where money is just a tool, a resource, a servant, not a god. When you know who you are, when you stay connected to what truly matters, when you live in alignment with your inner truth, money becomes a byproduct, not the goal. You no longer say yes to everything just to earn. You don't trade your time, health, relationships, or freedom for numbers. You begin to build things that nourish you and others. You choose not more, but deeper. Financial freedom doesn't begin when you have a lot. It begins when you're no longer afraid to lose. When you realize that what's most important lives within you, and everything else will follow. The truth is simple. I use money to express the soul. I don't silence the soul for the sake of money. That is true power. That is a new path. A path where the spiritual and the material no longer fight, but serve one thing, a life filled with meaning, warmth, and light. We've walked a long path together, from questions buried deep within, to truths that many feel, but are afraid to say out loud. The world has taught us to value the material over the internal. It taught us to strive, to compare, to achieve. But it never taught us how to simply be. We live in an age where almost anything can be bought, and yet true closeness, peace, joy, and meaning remain out of reach. If the soul is forgotten, it's important to understand, it's not money that destroys the soul. It's the choices we make when we give in to fear, to status, to external expectation. When we stay silent, when we want to scream, when we say yes, when we long to run, when we forget who we truly are. But there is always a choice, to start listening, to start feeling, to start being honest with yourself. Maybe not all at once, maybe not perfectly, but genuinely. You don't have to prove your worth. You are not a project, not a paycheck, not a function. You are a soul, living, feeling, searching, and it deserves to be heard. Now is the time to remember who you are. Beyond your job title, your income, your roles. End this video not just with a thought, but with a pause. Just sit in silence. Listen to yourself. Maybe, just maybe, this is the moment your soul finally speaks the words you haven't allowed yourself to hear in a long time. And that is when the real journey begins.